It's again based on comparison of revised model GST law and the GST bill which has been passed in Lok Sabha. Last time we have completed and discussed the provisions and have done the comparison of supplies, time of supply of goods and services. Now this time in this session we are going to touch upon on two aspects, that is registration and the place of supply of goods and or services. Although there are not much changes in place of supply, the provisions are almost same except one or two changes, but then also I intend to cover up the entire place of supply of goods and services once again in brief, so that we get a flair of the same again, and then there are certain questions also which we need to touch upon. We will be touching upon that, and then we will be left out with input tax credit and along with that payment of tax. These two topics we will be covering in the next session, and then thereafter we will be starting our regular sessions on the basis of bill only. So we will be doing 3 extra sessions now, and we will be covering entire subjects or entire topic that we have covered up till now, and then thereafter we will be starting the regular topics which are yet to be covered. So with this brief background of the session that we are going to cover up today, let me tell you that we will be starting with registration, then we will be going to the place of supply of goods and services. Then I have certain queries of Mr. Ravi Bura, Mr. Alkesh Kapadia and Mr. Sanjeev Kadil. We will be touching upon those queries, and if thereafter any queries are there, we will be touching upon on that. So again, today's session is going to be very crucial. It deals with the compliance part of registration, and then thereafter place of supply of goods and services, which as per me is the most relevant subject or most relevant topic so far as GST is concerned. So now let me begin, and we'll be starting with registration. Before going into this topic and discussing the provisions in the bill which has been cleared in the Lok Sabha in last week, let me make you remind or remember once again what were the provisions that we have discussed earlier. Registration was covered under section 23 of the revised model GST law. The major provision was any person who is liable to get himself registered as per schedule 5 of the model GST law shall apply for registration in each state where he is so liable within a period of 30 days from the date on which he is becoming liable for registration. This was the main provision. So we have concluded that schedule 5 was the main schedule which was discussing about the liability to get registered. Now what has happened in GST bill? In GST bill, they have removed schedule 5. Rather, I would say they have deleted schedule 5. Now there is no schedule 5. And what they have done is they have merged schedule 5 in the provisions of registration. And now the registration is starting from section 22. The subject or the chapter of registration is starting from section 22, and it is being continued till section 30. So we will be covering one by one each section, irrespective of the fact that we have discussed the section in detail, line to line, in our earlier session, but then also what the bill says we will be discussing now once again, and this will be helpful for each one of us to just to recollect whatever we have learned and to compare whether there are any changes or not. Section 22. Section 22 provides person who is liable for registration, and it says that if a person is crossing a threshold limit of aggregate turnover, which is a specified turnover, then he is supposed to take registration. And what is that aggregate turnover specified threshold limit? The threshold limit other than a special category is 20 lakhs, and in case of special category states it is 10 lakhs. Now which are those special category states? It's defined in 101st Constitution Amendment Act, Article 279, Clause 4 and Subclause G. There are 11 states which are mentioned therein, and if you are there or if you are supplying from those 11 states, then your threshold limit is 10 lakhs, and if you are not based in those 11 states, then your threshold limit will be 20 lakhs. Now, one thing that has to be discussed here is those 11 states also include the state of Jammu and Kashmir. And as we have discussed earlier in the last session, that now Jammu and Kashmir has been left out from the applicability of Central Goods and Services Tax law. It's not covered. It says that it extends to whole of India except the state of Jammu and Kashmir. So, in all those special category states which comprises of total 11 states including Jammu and Kashmir, if the turnover exceeds 10 lakhs, then in that situation you will have to take registration. And in other states, then these special category states, if your turnover crosses, aggregate turnover crosses 20 lakhs, then you will have to make an application and get yourself registered. Now, every supplier who is liable in the state from where he is supplying and aggregate turnover in financial year exceeds 20 lakh rupees, he is supposed to take registration. And in the same manner, if it exceeds 10 lakhs in a special category states, then it's 10 lakhs. And this is what we have discussed, where the supply made to states such as Arunachal Pradesh, its supply made from states such as Arunachal Pradesh, Assam, Jammu and Kashmir, Manipur, Meghalaya, Mizoram, Nagaland, Sikkim, Tripura, Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand, supplier liable to be registered if aggregate turnover exceeds 10 lakh rupees. This is what is the second limb of our threshold limit. And now subsection 2 of section 22 provides, a person who is presently registered under any law will be liable to take registration on the appointed day itself, irrespective of what aggregate turnover he has. But if in case he is registered in the current law, maybe under VAT, maybe under central excise, maybe under service tax, he is compulsorily required to be registered or to get the registration under GST on the appointed day. That means from the appointed day, which is expected to be 1st July 2017, he needs to be registered. Subsection 3 provides, in case there is any transfer of business on account of succession or otherwise, then he shall be liable to be registered with effect from date of such transfer or succession. In case of transfer or succession, the date on which such transfer or succession is getting effected, from that day he needs to get himself registered. And subsection 4 says that other than the cases which includes transfer of business on account of succession or otherwise, if there is a case of amalgamation or demerger by an order of court, tribunal, then he shall be registered or he shall be liable to be registered with effect from the date on which Registrar of Companies issues a certificate of incorporation. It means if it is a situation of transfer of business on account of succession or otherwise, then the date on which the transfer is being effected, from that day he has to take registration. He shall be liable for being registered. And in other situation, that means amalgamation or demerger, the date on which the Registrar of Companies issues the certificate of incorporation will be the date on which he will become liable for registration. Now, an explanation has been provided in section 22, which says that aggregate turnover shall include all supplies made by the taxable person, whether on his own account or made on behalf of all his principals. We have already discussed this while discussing the aggregate turnover definition also, that a person who is acting as a principal and the other person who is acting as an agent or vice versa, the entire turnover will be included in the aggregate turnover. So similarly he says that all supplies which are made by a taxable person, whether on his own account or on behalf of any principal, that is as an agent, that will be included in aggregate turnover for the purpose of calculation of 20 lakhs or 10 lakh limit. In case of job work, what will happen? If the job worker is registered, then that turnover, that is the job work turnover, will not be included in the turnover of job worker. That is what clause 2 of this explanation says. Let me read this. The supply of goods after completion of job work by a registered job worker shall be treated as the supply of goods by the principal. This we have already touched upon, that in case of job worker, if the principal is registered and the principal is supplying goods for job work and the goods are returned back within a period of 6 months or 1 year or 3 years, then in that situation the principal will be liable. And if it is not returned within that specified time limit, then principal will be liable, and it will be said that the supply has been made on the date when the goods were sent for the job work. So similarly it says that as the supply of goods by the principal referred to in section 143, which deals with job work provisions, transition provisions, and the value of such goods shall not be included in the aggregate turnover of the registered job worker. It means if I am registered and I am a principal and I am sending certain goods for job work and those goods are returned back to me after the job work, then it will be forming part of my aggregate turnover and not the turnover of registered job worker. And last, clause 3 says special category states shall mean the states as specified in subclause G of clause 4 of article 279A of the Constitution. This we have already discussed, that these 11 states which are there on your screen are special category states, and if you are supplying from these states, then the limit applicable to you will not be 20 lakhs, it will be 10 lakhs only. Subsection 20, section 23. Persons who are not liable for registration. Simple. First is a person who is engaged exclusively in the business of supplying goods and or services that are not liable to tax or are wholly exempt from tax under this act or under the IGST Act. So it means if a person is only involved in supplying the goods or services which are not taxable or wholly exempt from tax, whether under the Central Goods and Services Tax Act or the Integrated Goods and Services Tax Act, those persons will not be required to take registration. Second is an agriculturist for the purpose of agriculture who cultivates the land will be excluded from the requirement of taking registration. And last, this clause has been newly inserted, it was not there earlier. It says that government may, on the recommendation of the council, by notification specify the category of persons who may be exempted from obtaining registration under this act. So on the basis of recommendation of the GST council, the government, that is the central government, may come out with certain notifications and specify those category of persons who are not supposed to take registration under this act. So these are the three persons who are excluded from the liability of taking registration under section 23 of the GST bill. Then section 24. You all might remember that schedule 5 we have discussed, and in schedule 5 there were 12 situations in which you were compulsorily required to take registration irrespective of the fact whether your turnover exceeds 20 lakhs or 10 lakhs or not. Even if you have a turnover of 1000 rupees or 10,000 rupees or 10 lakhs or 1 lakh, you are compulsorily required to take registration. And now from schedule 5, since it has been deleted, it has been now covered into section 24. all those 12 situations will be seen in this section, that is section 24. First is persons making any interstate taxable supply. If you are making any interstate taxable supply, whether of goods or services, you are compulsorily required to take registration, irrespective of the turnover. Second is casual taxable person who is making a taxable supply. Again, compulsorily required. Just since the term has been used, casual taxable supply, let me brush up all your memories, and it said that casual taxable person is a person who is temporarily entering into a state for doing any business or making any taxable supplies. Then he can make an application and get himself registered, and the duration of registration will be 90 days, and the entire estimated tax liability for the taxable supplies within the duration of 90 days will have to be paid in advance at the time of making the application for registration. And the time limit within which he needs to take registration is, he has to take registration at least 5 days prior to the date when he is willing to commence his business. So this was the provision pertaining to casual taxable person that we have deliberated earlier, and we are also going to deliberate today again as per the new provisions. Third is person who are required to pay tax under reverse charge. We have discussed this also. Section 9, levy and collection, that we have discussed in session 1, extra session 1. Section 9, subsection 3 provides for reverse charge, and also subsection 4 provides for reverse charge where you are purchasing any goods and you are registered, whereas the person from whom you are getting the supplies is not registered. In that situation also, you will be liable to pay the GST under reverse charge. Persons who are required to pay tax under subsection 5 of section 9, that is electronic commerce operator, non-resident taxable person making taxable supplies. Again, casual taxable person is a person who is registered in some other state in India, and he is entering into some other states where he is not registered, and he is seeking a temporary registration for 90 days or an extended period of 90 days. In case of non-resident person, the only difference is that he has no permanent place of business in India. He is coming to India for a temporary period for doing business or making taxable supplies, and thereby he is seeking application for registration and getting the registration for a period of 90 days. Rest all the provisions are similar to the casual taxable person. Persons who are required to deduct tax under section 51. Then persons who make taxable supply of goods and services or both on behalf of other taxable person, whether it is an agent or otherwise, he will have to take registration irrespective of the turnover. Input service distributor, whether or not separately registered under this act. Persons who supply goods and services or both other than supplies is specified under section 9(5) through such electronic commerce operator who is required to collect tax at source under section 52. Every electronic commerce operator, irrespective of the turnover. Every person supplying online information and database access or retrieval services from a place outside India to a place in India other than a taxable person. And last is such other person or class of persons as may be notified by the central government on the basis of recommendation by the GST Council. So these are the 12 category of persons who are compulsorily required to take registration. The entire thing we have discussed while discussing the registration provisions earlier in our sessions, but I have touched upon because now it is not part of Schedule 5. Earlier we have discussed this as part of Schedule 5 and now it becomes section 24. Moving further, what is the procedure for registration? That we have discussed in section 23 earlier. More or less the provisions are similar in section 25 also. It says a person who is liable, earlier it was telling a person who is liable to get himself registered under Schedule 5. Now it says a person who is liable to get himself registered under section 22 and 24 that we have discussed earlier shall apply in each state where they are made liable to pay the tax. Then within 30 days from the date he becomes liable, he will have to make an application for registration. The registration has to be made in the prescribed manner and subject to certain conditions which are specified. Then in case of casual taxable person and non-resident taxable person, he will have to apply at least 5 days prior to the commencement of his business. This is what we have already discussed. Then for one state or a union territory, the person shall be granted a single registration in that state or union territory. It's very clear that for one state or union territory, no multiple registrations will be granted. But there is an option of going for a separate registration even in a state, but the condition is that separate registration can be opted only in a case where it's a separate business vertical. If it is not a separate business vertical, then you cannot opt for seeking a separate registration within the state. It means if you have 7 branches and all are doing similar type of business, then in that situation only one registration is sufficient. You will be allowed to take only one registration. You have no option for second registration. But in a situation out of 7 branches, you have 2 branches which are falling under the definition of business vertical, then for those 2 branches you can go for a separate registration. Then over and above these compulsory requirements, or after the crossing of 20 lakh limits, you have one more option that you can go for or apply for registration voluntarily. It means you are not required compulsorily to take registration. Number 2, your aggregate turnover also does not exceed 20 lakh or 10 lakh rupees, but then also you have an option to go for a voluntary registration. Now it says that it shall be treated as a distinct person in case of multiple registration within a state and also in 2 different states. It means if you are having 3 business verticals, all of these 3 are separately registered. See, remember that it is an option given to you. It is not compulsion. So you have an option whether to go for 3 registrations. At the same time, you have an option whether to go for only 1 registration. Now, if you have exercised the option and you have taken 3 registrations, then all these 3 persons who are separately registered business verticals will be treated as distinct person for the purpose of this act, and therefore any supplies made to them will be made taxable. And similarly, in multiple states, if it is within same states, it will be a case of business vertical, but if it is not within the same state, it may be even a branch which is similar, which is doing or indulge in similar activities which you are doing in other state. So in that situation also, if it is multiple states, then branch in each state will be treated as separate distinct person. And PAN is compulsory for getting registration under GST. There is only one exception, and that exception is in case of non-resident taxable person. If a person is a non-resident taxable person, then the central government may come out with certain specified documents which are to be produced by the non-resident taxable person for the purpose of getting registration. And it's very clear that he will not be having a PAN number of India. So if there is a provision of non-resident taxable person, then certainly there has to be a provision that what will happen in case he does not have a PAN number. So in case of a non-resident taxable person, the PAN number is not a compulsion. There will be certain specified documents prescribed by the central government, and those documents, if provided, the registration will be granted to a non-resident taxable person. Then a person who is liable to deduct TDS. If I have a liability, I am falling under the situation wherein I have the liability of deducting TDS, then over and above the PAN number, I must have a TAN number, that is tax deduction account number, and also a tax collection account number in case I am liable for tax collection at source. Tax collection at source as per the GST law is made applicable to electronic commerce operator. All the electronic commerce operator are supposed to take tax collection account number, and these numbers will not be of income tax. I am reminding you once again, these tax deduction account number or tax collection account number will be issued by the GST law. It will be issued under the GST law. The tax deduction account number or tax collection account number which you are already having under the Income Tax Act will not be applicable to you. You will have to go for a separate number. Non-resident taxable person shall have to submit any other prescribed document for registration. We have already discussed this. In case of failure to register, proper officer may proceed to register such person in the prescribed manner. If you are required to take registration and if you fail to go for registration or apply for registration and the proper officer comes to know about the same, then the proper officer can make you register in the prescribed manner which is provided in the law. Granting of unique identification number. This will be granted to certain organizations in place of registration certificate. That means you will not be having a registration number. In spite of that or in place of that, you will be having a unique identification number. And the purpose of having such unique identification number can be asking for a refund of taxes which are paid under this section. Now, registration shall be granted or rejected in the manner and within the prescribed time limit. It has to be granted in the prescribed time limit and in the prescribed manner. So, as per the registration rules, that time limit is 3 working days. Within 3 working days, the registration shall be granted, or it may be, or it can be rejected. Registration certificate shall be issued in the prescribed form with the effective date of registration. Now, unique identification number shall be granted for such purposes, including refund of taxes in case of any specialized agency of the UNO or any multilateral financial institution and the organization notified under the United Nations Privilege and Immunity Act 1947, consulate or embassy of foreign countries, and any other person, classes of person as will be notified by the commissioner. So in these situations, that means specialized agency or the UNO or multilateral financial institution or organization notified under the United Nations Privilege and Immunity Act, consulate or embassy, or notified by the commissioner. So in these situations, you can have a unique identification number in place of a registration number. And registration or UIN shall be deemed to be granted after the expiry of period prescribed under subsection 10 of section 25, which is 3 days, provided no deficiency has been communicated to the applicant within such period. So it means that if within 3 days prescribed time limit, you have no communication from the department or the GSTN that there are certain shortcomings, then in that situation it will be presumed that the registration has been granted to you. So this was the entire procedure for registration with a minor change in what we have discussed earlier. Now it comes to deemed registration. This also we have touched upon earlier. It says that if in the SGST law or the UTGST law, that is Union Territory Goods and Services Tax Act, you are granted a registration, then it will be deemed that, it will be presumed that you have also been granted the registration under the Central Goods and Services Tax, provided the application is not rejected under section 10 of section 25, that is within 3 days. If it is not rejected, then in that situation it will be presumed that Once you have registration under SGST or UTGST law, you are already registered under, or you are automatically registered under the Central Goods and Services Tax law also. At the same time, if rejected under one law, that is SGST or UTGST, then it will be presumed that you have already been rejected by the Central Goods and Services Tax law also. Only one situation is there where you have already issued, or where you have already received a registration certificate. In that situation, it will not be presumption basis, because you already have a registration certificate. Otherwise, if one act rejects, the other act will automatically reject. Similarly, if one act accepts, then the other act will automatically accept. Section 27, casual taxable person and non-resident taxable person. This we have discussed today also. In starting, I have touched upon this. Casual taxable person or non-resident taxable person, that certificate shall be valid for a period of 90 days from the effective date of registration, or the period is specified in the registration. If it can be less than 90 days also, whichever is earlier. If it is 80 days, then 80 days. If it is 10 days, then 10 days. If it is 90 days, then 90 days, whichever is earlier. Taxable supply shall be made only after the issuance of RC. Proper officer may extend this period to further 90 days on sufficient reasons being shown. Casual taxable person or non-resident taxable person make an advance deposit, or must make an advance deposit of tax in an amount equivalent to the estimated tax liability at the time of application under section 25 subsection 1. In case of extension period also, the amount which is estimated as a tax liability shall be paid in advance, and then amount which will be deposited as an advance tax liability will be forming part of electronic cash ledger, and it can be utilized for the purpose of making payment of tax as per the provisions of section 49 of the GST bill. Now section 28, amendment of registration. If you all can remember, there were two situations. One was those situations wherein the amendment will be automatically granted by the proper officer. If you are making certain amendments in your registration, then those amendments will be automatically updated in your records. And then second kind of amendments were wherein the proper officer will have to approve or reject your amendment application. So the same provision is there in bill also, but let us touch it once again. It will not take more than 2 minutes. Person shall inform the proper officer of any changes in the information prescribed at the time of registration or that furnished subsequently, in the manner and within such period as may be prescribed. The proper officer may approve or reject in the registration particulars in the manner and within such period as may be prescribed. He has a time limit under the registration rules. Within that time limit, he will have to either approve it or reject it. Approval of the proper officer shall not be required in respect of particulars prescribed. So it means for certain particulars prescribed, you can make an amendment. As soon as you will make the amendment or file an application, automatically it will be approved, because formal approval for such prescribed amendments are not required. And then if the proper officer is willing to reject your registration or your application of amendment of registration, he will have to issue a show cause notice and provide an opportunity of being heard, reasonable opportunity of being heard. Otherwise, he cannot make the rejection order for amendment application. And then approval or rejection in one law, that is SGST or UTGST, will be presumed that it has been rejected or approved in central law also. Next is cancellation of registration. All the provisions are same, so we may skip this. There were two situations that we have discussed. One situation was wherein the person who is registered, he or his legal heir can make an application for cancellation, or even the proper officer can cancel on his own. And the second situation was where the proper officer will cancel your registration, And there was what were those situations? If first situation was where there is a death, there is transfer of business. In those situations, it was on the basis of application by the legal heir or the proper officer on his own. But in second situation, wherein the proper officer was supposed to cancel, it was non-filing of return for 6 months. In case of composition levy, non-filing for consecutive 3 periods. If you have taken voluntary registration and have not started business during the 6 months period from the date of registration, in all those situations it was supposed to be cancelled. So the same provisions are there in section 29 also. I am not touching upon that. Just go through clause A, B and C. Business has been discontinued, transferred fully, or any reason including death of proprietor, amalgamated with any other legal entity, demerged or otherwise disposed of, or there is change in constitution of the business from partnership it has become to company, or the taxable person other than person registered under subsection 3, that is voluntary registration, is no longer liable to be registered. A person who is compulsorily required to register under section 24 or 22 is now no longer for being registered. So in that situation, he can make an application of cancellation of his registration. And what is the situation wherein the registration will be cancelled by the officer? Where the registered taxable person has contravened the provisions, where he is registered as a composition dealer and not filed 3 subsequent or consecutive tax period returns. If he is registered, then he has not filed returns for 6 months. At the same time, if he is registered as a voluntary person or a voluntary basis, then he has not started his business within 6 months from the date of registration. In all these situations, or where the registration has been obtained by way of fraud or suppression of fact or willful misstatement. So in all these situations, the proper officer can cancel the registration, but before cancelling the registration, he will have to give an opportunity of being heard to the person. Rest of the provisions are same. And this is section 30, which is the last section pertaining to registration, and it deals with revocation of cancellation of registration. Again, if you all remember, there was a period of 30 days. If your order is, or if your registration order is issued or your registration is cancelled, then you can apply for revocation of such cancellation of registration within a period of 30 days from such order. And then if the proper officer is of the opinion that yes, it should be revoked, he can revoke, otherwise he will have to reject your application of revocation. But before rejecting that, he will have to give an opportunity of being heard. A person may apply for revocation of cancellation of registration to such proper officer in prescribed manner within 30 days from the date of service of the cancellation order. PO may by an order either revoke or revoke cancellation of the registration, or reject the application for revocation for good and sufficient reasons. Show cause notice and reasonable opportunity of being heard should be given in case of rejection of appeal for revocation of cancellation of registration. It has to be given. And last, approval or rejection in one law, that is SGST or UTGST, will be presumed that it has been revoked in the other law also, or it has been rejected. That means the application for revocation of cancellation of registration is rejected or approved in the CGST law also. So friends, these were the provisions pertaining to registration, and now we have already dealt with the old provision, that was section 23 read with schedule 5, and now section 22 to section 30. Now let me give a break of 3 minutes. Let me take a break of 3 minutes, and after 3 minutes what we will try to do is we will take the question answers pertaining to registration, and then we will move ahead to the topic of place of supply of goods and place of supply of service. Welcome back. Now the topic that I have discussed was registration, and now we are going to deliberate on place of supply of goods and services. Now although there are not much changes, almost similar provisions are there which we have discussed in revised model GST law, IGST Act section 7, 8, 9 and 10, And now the sections are changed. Those sections are section 10, 11, 12 and 13. So we'll be discussing again in brief, and then we'll take the question answers. The only purpose of keeping this topic again is, this is one of the most crucial topics as per me, and therefore we need to be sure about the determination of place of supply of goods and services. Section 10, subsection 1, clause A. Supply includes or involves a movement of goods. Then the place where the movement terminates will be the place of supply of goods. I will be touching upon in brief only. If you have any queries, you can post those queries. There are other queries also pertaining to place of supply. We will be touching all those queries today. The session again is going to be completed within half an hour. So please, whatever questions you have, please raise those questions pertaining to place of supply of goods or services. Section 10, subsection 1, clause B. Goods supplied on direction of a third person. So this also we have touched upon, that if I have entered into a contract with one person who is located at one particular place, and at the time of movement of goods he instructs me that in spite of sending the goods to his place, send those goods to some other place. So in that situation, it will be presumed that the person who is instructing, here he is known as called as a third person. The person who is instructing has received the goods first, and then thereafter he has transferred the goods or supplied the goods to the destination. So this is clause B. Section 10, subsection 1, clause C. Supply does not include movement of goods. In this situation, the location of goods at the time of delivery to the recipient will be the place of supply of goods. Goods are assembled or installed at a site, then the location of the assembly, or that means where the goods are assembled, or the site will be the place of supply of goods. And clause E, subsection 1 of section 10, goods supplied on board a conveyance, vessel, aircraft, train, vehicle, etc. The location at which such goods are taken on board. The place from where the goods are taken on board, not the place where the goods are supplied. The place where the goods are taken on board will be the place of supply in this situation. And subsection 2 of section 10 provides that where none of the above rules is applicable, then the place of supply shall be determined in the manner that will be prescribed. Now, section 10 was pertaining to supply of goods other than export or import. Now what about supply of goods in case of export or import? So first and foremost, what is export of goods? It means taking out of India to a place outside India. What is import of goods? Means bringing goods into India from a place outside India. And this is the provision. Section 11 subsection 1 says goods imported into India, what will be the place of supply? The location of the importer will be the place of supply. And in case where the goods are exported out of India, the location outside India will be the place of supply. And one note was discussed which says that section 5, which provides for levy and collection under the Integrated Goods and Services Tax Act, shall be levied on goods imported into India as per section 3 of Customs Tariff Act, and the point of taxation when duties of customs are leviable on the said goods, and the value will be as determined under the Customs Act. Now this was place of supply of goods. Similarly, very fast we will be doing place of supply of services. Now place of supply of service, that is service where it is within India. It means it is not supplied outside India, or it is not imported in India. How to determine the place of supply? Then it says that for supply of any other service, the place of supply is, otherwise the thumb rule is that the place of supply will be the location of the service recipient. That will be the place of supply. But in certain situations which we are going to discuss now, section 12 subsection 2, it says that if the recipient is a registered person, he is registered, then the location of the recipient will be the place of supply of services. Subsection 2 clause B subclause 1 says, if unregistered person, if the goods of the services are supplied to an unregistered person, then whatever address is there in the records of the supplier will be the place of supply of service. And in case it is supplied to a unregistered person and there is no address on record, then in that situation the location of the supplier will be the place of supply of services. This all we have discussed earlier and the provisions are similar. There is no change, but yet I was willing to touch this topic again. I was willing to repeat this, and therefore I have covered this in today's extra session. Now, another situation is supply of services which are directly in relation to the immovable property. Maybe grant of rights, maybe construction, maybe use, maybe accommodation which is being provided for any marriage functions, any events, letting out, the architect services for designing, the surveyor services, etc. All these services which are directly in relation to immovable property. In that situation, the place of supply will be the location of the immovable property. And in a situation of immovable property where the services are directly in relation to lodging, club, etc., then again the place of immovable property will be the place of supply of service. And the ancillary service pertaining to immovable property or lodging, club, etc., all those ancillary services, the place of supply of service will be the location of the immovable property. Then next is restaurant or catering services, personal grooming, fitness, beauty treatment, health service including the cosmetic and plastic surgery. The place of supply of service will be the location where such services are actually performed. That will be the place of supply of service. Supply of service of technical and performance appraisal. Training and performance appraisal. Then if such services are provided to a registered recipient, then the location of the recipient. If it is not provided to a registered person, that is provided to an unregistered person, then the place of actual performance will be the place of supply. Supply of services for admission to any cultural or artistic function, sporting event, scientific or educational affair, then entertainment event, amusement park, services ancillary to the above. In all those situations, venue of the event or the park will be the place of supply of service. Then supply of organizing cultural arts, sports, educational, scientific, entertainment, conference, exhibition or similar events, or services ancillary to the above, or assigning sponsorship to such events. If provided to a registered person, the location of the recipient will be the place of supply of service, and if provided to an unregistered person, the venue of the event will be the place of supply of service. And in case such event is held outside India, then the location of the recipient will be the place of supply of service. Further, it says transportation of goods including by mail or by courier. If it is provided to a registered person, then location of the recipient. If unregistered person, then location where the goods are handed over for the purpose of transportation will be the place of supply of service. Next is passenger transportation service. If to a registered person, then place of registered recipient. If not to a registered person, then place where the passenger embarks, that is, starts his journey on the conveyance for a continuous journey. Services on board conveyance like vessel, aircraft, train, motor vehicle, etc. Then the first scheduled point of departure of that conveyance for the journey will be the place of supply of service. Next is pertaining to telecommunication services, including the data transfer, broadcasting, D2H, and cable operator, etc. If it is through a fixed telecommunication line, lease circuit, internet lease circuit, cable or disk antenna, then in that situation, the location of such device will be the place of supply of service. If it is a postpaid telephone connection or mobile connection, then in situation, the billing address of the person, billing address of the recipient will be the place of supply of service. If it is a situation of prepaid supplies and those prepaid supply of mobile cards or connections or internet services are made through a selling agent, then the location of the selling agent which is there on the record of the supplier. And if it is through any other person, then location where the prepayment is received, whether you are where the place where you are receiving the payment of such prepaid card will be the place of supply of service. And D will be in all the other cases which is not a fixed line, which is not a postpaid or a prepaid. In other cases it will be the address of recipient which is there on record, and if it is not there on record, then the location of the supplier. And if the supplies are made through internet, then in that situation location of recipient on record will be the place of supply of service. Banking and other financial services including stock broking, location of recipient in supplier's record, and if it is not available, then location of supplier. Insurance services, if it is provided to a registered person, location of recipient. If provided to an unregistered person, then location of recipient in the supplier's record. And last is advertisement services etc. to the government, then place in is state of dissemination in proportion. If you are providing or if you are entering into a contract with the government of India wherein multiple states have to be covered for advertisement, then it has to be, the place of supply has to be determined in the basis of proportion. Whatever services you are providing to one state, that will be the place of supply. And this is the provisions, or these are the provisions pertaining to location of or identification of place of supply of service where the supplier or recipient is outside India. It means export of service or import of service. Services in respect of goods required to be made physically available by recipient, and services requiring physical presence of receiver or person acting on his behalf. It means goods which are required, like some repairing has to be done, those goods are required, or those services can be provided when the goods are physically made available to you for the purpose of recovery. And second is where your physical presence is required. In both these situations, the location where the services are actually performed will be the place of supply of service. Services supplied directly in relation to immovable property. If the services are directly supplied in relation to immovable property, then again the location of immovable property will be the place of supply of service. And it can be other way also, that is where it is that where the immovable property is intended to be located. It means location of the immovable property or services which are pertaining to, or such services which are directly in relation to immovable property. Can be a designing service. You can import those designing services from outside India. In that situation, the place or the location where the immovable property is intended to be located, जिस जगह का एड्रेस दिया होगा या जिस जगह का नक्शा आपने बनाया वहाँ पे आपकी इमोबल प्रॉपर्टी होने वाली है, so that place will be the place of supply of service. Next is service by way of admission to organizing an event etc. and ancillary services pertaining to such events. Place where the event is actually held with the place of supply of service. Where any services, this is a new provision, section 13 subsection 6, this was not there earlier. Where any services referred to in subsection 3 to 5, that is physically presence होनी चाहिए, या directly immovable property से related हो, या event organize करने से related हो, is supplied at more than one location. If it is supplied at more than one location, including the taxable territory, it means आपने बाहर 10 countries 10 locations पे आपने ये services दी, including India or including any state in India, then in that situation the location in the taxable territory will be the place of supply of service. Then again this is a new clause, subsection 7 of section 13, where any services referred to in section 3, 4 or 5 is supplied at more than one state or union territories, then in each of the respective states or union territories the place of supply will be determined. It will be the each state or union territory as a place of supply of service. Banking services to account holders, intermediary services, hiring of means of transport other than aircraft or vessels up to 1 month. In this situation, location of the supplier will be the place of supply of service. It means banking service, to account holders, location of the bank. Intermediary service, location of the supplier. Hiring of means of transport, location of the supplier will be the place of supply of service. Transportation of goods other than by way of mail or courier, destination of goods, that means the place where the goods are destined or the goods are to be delivered will be the place of supply of service. Passenger transportation service, place from where the passenger is embarking on the conveyance for the continuous journey, from where he is entering into the conveyance. Service provided on board a conveyance, first scheduled point of departure of that conveyance for that journey, that will be the place of supply of service. And online information and database access or retrieval services, the location of the recipient. Again I am repeating, online information, database access or retrieval services. If these services are being provided from outside India or are imported into India, then the location of the recipient will be the place of supply of service. And last is to prevent double taxation or non-taxation, or for the uniform application of the rules, central government has power to notify services or circumstances wherein the place of supply of service will be the place of effective use and enjoyment of a service, where you are effectively using those services or you are enjoying those services, that can be determined as the place of supply of service in case the government is willing to avoid double taxation or to curb non-payment of tax. They can notify certain services and circumstances wherein the place of supply of service will be place of effective use and enjoyment of a service. So this was place of supply of service and place of supply of goods. Now my dear friends, I would like to touch upon once again one thing, that what we are trying to do is we have done 9 sessions. In all those 9 sessions, whatever provisions we have discussed, I am trying to compare those provisions with the bill that is finally passed at the Lok Sabha. So 2 extra sessions we have already done. We have already compared certain provisions. In this session we have compared registration and the place of supply. And in next session, which is going to be on 7th of April, that is Friday, we will be touching upon rest of the part, and I believe those parts are input tax credit, then payment of tax and the tax invoice. These are the 3 provisions that we will have to cover in next session, and after that session, that is after 7th April, we will be starting our regular sessions again. So now I invite all of you for questions and answers. So please, whatever question you have in mind pertaining to place of supply of goods and services, please raise those questions. Give me a break of 3 minutes, then we'll come together and take all those questions that you have in your mind.